Hey y'all, what's up? Welcome back to another episode of the podcast. I have the future Dr. Khalil Green here with me today. We have some really interesting things that we're going to be talking about, but Khalil, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Khalil Green. As Dr. Shonda has introduced me, I am a going on my seventh year, believe it or not, doctoral student, at this point, doctoral candidate at Morgan State University, and I'm getting my doctorate
Yes.
in social work. I am also a teaching fellow at James Madison University, where I teach in the social work department, and classes I teach is like field placement as well as contemporary families. We actually just finished the semester this Thursday as far as teaching, and now we're grading. What else do I do? I'm a fellow content creator. I have my own show called Feel Some Type of Way. It's every Wednesday, 9 p.m. Eastern Time on Instagram. What else do I do? Occasionally, when I'm in the mood, I write a little poetry. You know, to get my mind off the off
Yeah.
the stress.
I remember that. I remember you being a poetry writing
Uh,
type of person.
uh,
That's what's up though. You were actually reminding me of how we met in some of our interactions that we've had.
yeah,
So I'm new to the DMV area. You probably like were one of the first people I met.
really.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
yeah,
It was dope. But I guess we connected on our shared roles in like academia and
yes,
being like scholars and such.
yes. Yes,
Yeah.
we did. Yes, we did.
And you've
You
been
are,
doing a lot since then. Go ahead.
yeah. You were already knee deep in your transition as an academic though. You were teaching as well as holding down your position with what was it, John Hopkins?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I remember a little bit.
Yeah, so we definitely gotta reconnect.
Absolutely.
But yeah, so you've been doing some amazing work. You have a lot on your plate. And I just want to know, like, how do you do it all? Like, how do you kind of make time for like your dissertation and everything else that you're doing?
You know what? Honestly, I think the biggest thing is, in full transparency, I'm still I'm still somebody that needs to be better about organization.
Mm-hmm.
Um, because what ends up happening is like I'm always on a constant go. I remember
Yeah.
a couple of years ago, in the first year or so in the pandemic, uh, my sister my sister said to me, she was like, you're always on the go. When I was going down there to visit my family in Houston, she was like, you always on the move. I said, yeah. And I coming from being originally from a slower paced culture, from being from Texas, um, there was a lifestyle that was customary for me for a period of time. And then
Hmm.
coming to DC and learning what it was like to live in the East Coast, you naturally move faster. You don't have a choice.
Yes.
You don't have a choice, right? Or else you get pushed over in various different ways. And so you kind of find yourself, or at least for me, stealing stealing time, stealing the moments
Mm-hmm.
to the things that are important. And some of it is, I think, is divine intervention in the things that end up getting canceled or getting pushed
Mm-hmm.
back or moved.
Mm-hmm.
But I do think as stewards, as the church folks say, as stewards of time, I always think that plan things are the best strategy, because even if it doesn't go as planned, at least
Yeah.
you're tracking, just like you track your budget, you track your calories. That habit of tracking ensures that you get the best or the most out of the circumstance,
Mm-hmm.
even if the outcome is not exactly as you planned it. So that's
For
what
sure.
that is the space that I am continually working towards and working in. But yeah, I'm still in a lot of moments in
Yeah.
between that
Yeah.
time.
I feel like I'm in that season as well. You mentioned like how things sometimes might be canceled or,
Yeah.
divine intervention, like it might be postponed or what have you. I've had a lot of those moments recently, and even like me canceling on people if I feel as though it's not worth my time. It's not, I'm not getting any benefit out of it. I'm not, getting the monetary, like my honorarium out of it. Like lately I have had no issue with saying no to people. And I think the past few months have taught me that life is not promised and to like spend as much time as you can with your loved ones. So
Yeah.
I've been fully immersed in, spending time with my family and friends. A couple weeks ago, I got to see one of my best friend's youngest sister off the prom. Like just having those types of moments, like
What?
for real. Like it's because a lot of the things that we get caught up in, sometimes it's not even worth it when you kind of put it in the bigger perspective of things.
Can I take a parenthetical pause for the
Yeah,
prom? Is it just me, or is it that these young people's outfits for prom are way, way flyer than ours? Oh
yeah.
my God, it's I mean, they look.
Well, they look great, but I will say myself and my sister and our date, we was fly. Like even today, I would say like now that I would wear that dress even today. It was a timeless dress. It wasn't the traditional ball length gown. It was at the knee. Like it was dope.
Okay.
Um, so they didn't look better than me, but everybody else in 2008 probably.
Y'all hear her?
I'm just being honest. The people love me for my honesty. So,
Respect,
uh,
respect.
but yeah, so we just had a holiday a few days ago, Juneteenth.
Good.
So I'm always excited to celebrate freedom for my people. I had the opportunity to speak at a nearby HBCU, well, not so nearby, somewhere in Virginia. I still had to take a flight there, but it was dope just to be able to interact with like other individuals who worked at HBCUs and to
Yeah,
facilitate a workshop or whatever. How did you spend your Juneteenth?
working.
Working.
It's probably it was working and doing another near and dear
Yeah.
pastime of mine. I also practice this martial art called capoeira.
Okay.
I've been doing it now for about a year and probably 3 months. So
Dope.
yeah, that's
Yeah.
yeah.
Seems like you enjoyed it by engaging in things that you enjoy doing.
Yes, yes,
Okay.
yes.
Nice.
It,
I was actually reading. Go ahead.
no, and it means a lot too because I'm from Texas, so
Okay.
like I grew up with this. I grew up with this holiday, so it's definitely cool to see.
Yes.
It's cool to see the nation take it on and it become a national holiday. Um,
Yes.
it's no longer foreign. It's funny. Like Juneteenth used to be like a whisper.
Mm-hmm.
It used to be a whisper, and now it's a big noise.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's so interesting you brought that up because my dad is originally from Texas, or he spent a large number of years in Texas. Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah. So he was telling us like, way back in the day, like about Juneteenth. Because up north on the East Coast, that wasn't something that we really celebrated like that. We didn't really hear too much about it. And so he told us that it was like a big extravagant holiday.
Mm-hmm.
People will go out in the country, you would
Mm-hmm.
barbecue, support
Mm-hmm.
black businesses. For
Mm-hmm.
some reason, you drink strawberry soda. I don't know the
Mm-hmm.
significance of that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and it was like a thing, but
Mm-hmm.
I'm not gonna say what they called it there. So the name for it down there back in the day was N-word day. And it wasn't like derogatory, I guess, to them. It was just what they known it as.
It wasn't taken as that. I
Yeah.
ironically enough, I never that term never got said in my childhood or just through my maturation. That was never a thing.
Mm,
What was interesting is this, to your point, to add to what your father was telling you. I can remember just the different graphic T-shirts that came out over the years.
mm,
um, was definitely a big deal. And it's funny because now I look at where our culture is as far as like vintage T-shirts.
mm-hmm.
I'm saying to myself like, damn, I wish I would have kept.
I bet.
Yeah,
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 yeah.
yeah, yeah.
No, that's dope though. But I was reading an article about just like reparations. It was written by my homegirl, Dr. Janice, which was published in Forbes magazine. But she wrote about how recent research has suggested that reparations will not only help the Black community financially, but it'll also extend our life expectancy
Mm,
overall.
mm-hmm.
And as you know, we just celebrated Juneteenth. I'm wondering, like, what your perspective is of that.
I you know I'll say this. I am a fan of black people getting reparations, but I think we need to be very. It's funny because I'm not really a big fan of this word. I'm,
Mhm.
I'm a fan of the action, but not necessarily the word because I think it's getting used arbitrarily. I think we need to be very intentional about what is allocated to us. And I think the biggest thing that should be allocated is not necessarily money, but assets that have long term impact for us to have actually sustainable changes in our community. And one of the biggest things I'm referring to is like land,
Hmm.
um,
But wouldn't
land.
money be able to get us there?
Say it again.
Wouldn't money be able to get us there?
Um, uh, it depends. It
Hmm.
depends because here's the thing. Here's the thing. Policies have a way of influencing um, the worth of people's dollars. They have a way. They have a way of redlining is a policy.
Hmm.
Um, inflation is a economic machine that is informed by policy. So I like money. And here's the other thing too: our economy is not necessarily as stable as it once was.
Hmm.
And so I'm not really, as Dr. King said, I'm not really invested in the burning house of that when it comes to money, but the land that our ancestors in, invested their time, energy, their soul, their blood, sweat, and tears. I'm more concerned about that and other resources as well. Do I think money could be factored in? Sure, sure. But I don't know if that's necessarily should be the focus too, the main focus, because the other part of it too is that a tool is only as good as the person who yields it. And so my biggest concern about the black community is that we can be allocated money, but if we don't have the proper education about how the money game works, how economics really work,
Hmm.
we're just gonna add to the consumer margin that we already add to tremendously. You know, we black people are responsible for the overall spending wages of our society,
Hmm.
and that's a large spectrum of individuals coming from only representing 12% of the population. That means like those who live on the street, to Section 8, to lower middle class, upper middle class, higher, the 1% of black folks, we all contribute to that. And
Yeah.
you know what I'm saying? So like I want black folks to get something that is going to be concrete and has the means to actually be be something that we can actually use as real leverage
Hmm.
to building sustainable communities. Like for example, what about giving back all the land that was destroyed in Greenwood to all the living descendants, and furthermore, the
Yeah,
business,
we need that too.
right? You know what I'm saying?
Mhm.
The business is giving them full fledged grants around business development, even if they don't want to have a business, but like,
Mhm.
okay, we're gonna give them the right to be able to, somebody can rent, and build off their property, and they have to be paid for that. You know what I'm saying? So like, I think about those things now. Um, I'm just real skeptical about money. I'm real skeptical about
Mhm.
money.
Yeah. Okay. So when we in the lines and we stand in the line to receive our reparation checks, just make sure you hand yours over to me. But
Man, as long as you can double what I give you, I'm with it.
but you ain't getting it. You
Hey,
forfeited it.
listen. I know what if it was money, I'll tell you this. I know what I would do with it. I know what I would do with it.
Yeah. So I agree and disagree.
Okay.
Um, and I love having people on the pod that I disagree with too. So in terms of the agreement, I do think that like reparations for Black people, it should be multifaceted, right? Because as a result of the transatlantic slave trade, we weren't only impacted financially, but it also impacted our mental health, our physical health, like you said, policy, things of that nature. Therefore, in all the domains that we were impacted, we should also receive reparations in all of those domains, right?
I agree.
Um, when it comes to like resources and being able to actually get ahead in terms of like the racial wealth gap and owning property, things of that nature. We
Mhm.
reality is we need resources for that, and the resources is, i.e., money, right?
Mhm.
And so, it's easy to say like Black people like we may not spend it well or blah blah blah, but like you got to understand like our white counterparts, they had a 400-year head start. So of course it's going to
True.
look different on their end in
True.
terms of like the spending money and the assets they've been able to obtain um for America, for in America. So
Let me ask you a question.
yeah,
May I ask you a personal question?
sure. Depends on
It's
how
about money.
personal.
It's about money.
It depends on how personal. Go ahead.
So my question is, did you grow up with an allowance?
An allowance.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Okay. So based off that, um, how was your allowance allocated to you? How did your parents provide that allowance to you? What were the things that you had to check off in order to make that happen?
Chores, I
Okay.
guess.
Okay.
I grade sometimes.
Grades.
Hmm.
Were there any conversations around money management?
Hmm.
Okay. So like you were given a governance structure
Hmm.
around the money that you were given, how you had to earn it, why you were earning it, and also what to do with it. Now, I'm in full agreement with you. We do we do have a 400-year plus deficit in reference to what has happened to us as far as the allocation of resources and wealth, etc.
Hmm.
But I think that the money cannot. I don't think the money can be given if a part of those resources, as far as, and even I would even argue it needs to be a requirement that each black person that is given a certain amount of money is 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 educated thoroughly about
Hmm.
what this money thing really is,
Hmm.
because we can't go in with that reparations and use it still coming from the traumatic framework that we've been operating in. And that's my biggest concern. My biggest concern, and the thing about it is, like, remember, we don't live in a system that is in the best interest of us. And so my concern is, if the education is not there,
Yeah.
along a couple with the policy.
But
Go ahead.
I feel like financial just lacking financial intelligence in general is not just amongst black people. That's people across the board.
That
Like
that
white people have that problem too.
but doctor, that's true. But when there's a problem in the world, we suffer the most from it. So we can't.
Absolutely.
So in that being clear, it's even that much more important that we have it, because our problems are that much more dire because of the systemic circumstances
Mhm.
we experience. So we can't necessarily frame um, our problems in reference to them, because we're at the bottom of it. We're at the bottom of it.
Yeah, but I just feel like, okay, I feel like people in general, people in America need better financial habits and
Yes.
possibly further training regarding finances.
Yes.
Absolutely. But I feel
Yes.
like to say, we can't give black Americans this amount of money until they go through X, Y, and Z amount of financial literacy. I think one, it kind of like plays on the assumption that all of us are irresponsible with our money. And two, it plays on the assumption that like our dollars have to be policed. We're not like we're policing other people's dollars, and I'm not about to count nobody else's coins.
I hear you, but that happens regardless.
What you mean?
Systemically, our money's policed.
That doesn't make it okay though.
I'm not saying it's okay. What I'm saying is, we need to learn the game. We need to learn the game we're in. We need to learn the game we're in, and so we can not only know how to navigate it, so we can actually win. Now, systemically, the game needs to change. The game needs to change. Now, I'm not saying that black folks are not capable. What I'm saying is that we are not fully knowledgeable of how this system works against us. We know it works against us. We're very
Mhm.
aware of that, and I think people have a very, for the most part, there are a number of black people who have a very direct understanding of how to save and how to spend. I think but it's a much more nuanced game than that, and it is tethered. It's not just tethered to the color of our skin, but it's also tethered to different organizations and institutions, like even from the context of like the housing market, even to that of the stock exchange. There's different conversations. Like even in reference to, for example, let's take our brothers and sisters in Africa.
Mhm.
I don't want to assume, but where Africa is now from a resources standpoint, the majority of the countries in Africa that are rich in resources, their resources are not even theirs to monopolize at their own discretion. The
Mhm.
majority of our brothers and sisters that come from countries who are rich in resources like the Congo or even that of Nigeria, any country you can think of that has rich in minerals and etc. The people, whoever has colonized them, has has taken a premium out of those countries to a point where they have no control over it. And so my concern is that it can't just be about giving the resources without giving the place and understanding of the game, like a true understanding of the game, because otherwise we'll just end up getting exploited again. And what
Right.
will be said is that will be said, oh well, we gave you what you asked for. We gave you, you know what I'm saying? Like we gave you this, and this, and it's like it has to be played where it's ensured that there are things that are taken that we get back that cannot be taken from us.
Mhm.
Money is money. The reason why I'm so adamant about it, this is why I do it in this context, in this conversation. I'm opposing your view a bit, is because money is so fleeting. Money it's fleeting. Yes, it serves as a conduit to resources, or making some changes and making things happen. But that is not the only resources that's getting used. And in some ways, in some contexts, like I said, what's happening in America, it's a depreciating value to an extent. It's a depreciating value. Like it's like this. My first year, my first year in my doctorate, I was riding the Uber. I think I was riding the Uber to campus, and I was talking to this white dude that was driving me. I said this to him. I said, you know what? I said, you know why the value of money is so powerful? And he was like, why? I said, because we believe in it. We believe in it. And what I'm saying to him with that is that its value is only valued based off what we believe it can get for us. The actions that in the exchange, like, oh, it got me this, but we place that value on it.
Mhm.
That piece of paper, we place that value on it. And so, like, I'm very careful about, do we need money? Yes, but there are other parts of that we need either just as much or even more. So that's where my stance is. But everything you're saying, I'm not in I'm not in opposition. I just have a different angle than you.
Yeah, no, I think we're both saying the same thing, right? So as Black people, we need, of course, money, and there's also things in other domains that we should receive, in terms of like reparations. Um, do I think that all people, whether you're Black, white, Asian, Hispanic, need better financial literacy? Absolutely. Do I feel as though there should be a contingency plan on Black people regarding like the what we receive and when we receive it? No, I don't.
Okay.
Because I think that ultimately aligns with, again, like that white supremacy, that tendency to control in term our resources,
Yeah.
right? So like our resources are being controlled before we even get it in our hands. Like I think that's whack. Um for people to do. Yeah, that's just where I am.
Okay.
So all I'm saying is run me my money, America.
I
That's it. That's all. Give me my money. My ancestors suffered.
hear you. I hear you.
No, but I definitely respect your perspective, and I think you definitely made some valid points.
I appreciate
Yeah, 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 yeah. All right.
it.
We're just gonna agree to disagree.
That's okay. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. We still friends.
We are. Indeed, we are.
All right. So, tell me about some of the things you got going on regarding your dissertation. I know like you have a very interesting topic that you're digging into.
Yes, I am. I'm studying corporal punishments long-term impact on African American men's social outcomes. For those who are not necessarily familiar with the term corporal punishment, that means ass whoopings. Uh, frankly, plainly, uh, child rearing experiences, et
Yeah.
cetera, et cetera. Uh, um, I am in interest of studying this phenomenon in a particular way is because across the board, our lived experience is usually codified under the lens of quantitative research,
Hmm.
which doesn't give the full context, which is why we do qualitative or do mixed methods. And I think in order for our experience to become more visible and to add more validity to our experiences, we need the stories as well as the numbers. And so
Hmm.
I've made the conscious decision to tell the story intimately because there is a particular perspective I am looking to gain, and the perspective is that I want those who come after me and those who read my work in the present time. I want them to be able to see the nuances of how rearing a child, I mean, emerging black man in this environment, that particular way,
Hmm.
has impact has impact in a way that we don't always recognize. That it gets used as a mechanism to dehumanize um, an emerging young man in a particular way. And there's only particular exceptions to certain content. There's particularly only exceptions to the rule of how that dehumanization actually can be neutralized to an extent.
Yeah.
There's
Yeah. So
certain
you're saying a lot of great things. Break this down in layman's terms.
sorry about that. So what I'm saying is that my concern is that there are outcomes regarding how young black men experience getting disciplined
Mm.
um, that have negative outcomes. And so, for example, when he keeps saying outcomes, what does he mean by that? So there have been several studies that have linked corporal punishment, being exposed to corporal punishment over a period of time, to cognitive impairment. Um,
What does that look like?
what does it look like?
Hmm.
So, in the context of academia, it would look like a child's ability to process,
Hmm.
um, a child's ability to concentrate, ironically, right?
Yeah.
Um, if for I can't think of all of them on the top of my head from the cognitive
Yeah.
standpoint, but
Like assessment.
intellectual
Yeah.
delays in general, and there's
Mm.
a spectrum of that. In reference to physical, I can give you some. This is real big for us: hypertension, heart disease. Yeah, yeah,
Talk
yeah,
more about that.
yeah. So I won't even use us. I'll use a study from across the pond, way across the pond. Um, I use them particularly before I tell it. I use them particularly because I think anecdotally, a lot of people look at these populations of people with a level of surface reverence for their success
Hmm.
or their appearance of success. So who am I referring to? I'm referring to the Chinese. So there was some studies a while back that looked at the effects of corporal punishment with a large number of Chinese individuals, and what they found was it was linked to alcoholism,
Mm.
hypertension, and depression. Oh, excuse me, and smoking,
Wow.
smoking addiction. And I look at that, I said, huh, oh, that sounds like,
Wow.
who is that? Who is that? And see, and what's great about their study is that their culture, for the most part, is still a sterile culture in the sense that it's Chinese and Chinese. You know, it's foreigners that are there, but for the most part, they're still mainly the inhabitants of their own country for the most part. And so they don't have the same influence. They don't have the same social cultural influence as that of like somebody who lives in America or another space. The reason why that's important is because that gives a clear understanding of potentially how this particular practice impacts this country or of people who we know when it comes to the industry or anything that they put their hands on, they're very productive individuals. And one of the main anecdotal things that gets said about what or the reason why we discipline our children that way, well, I want to ensure my kid, is a productive member of society, or um, it happened to me, I turned out all right. Mm. And so I even from that, and so I challenged that idea. Now this is not to say that everything is negative, but I challenge that idea because it's like there's things that we're not acknowledging. So for example, let's talk about the mental health piece.
Mm-hmm.
I mentioned earlier a little bit about the depression, but we have this big thing that we talk about a lot, like you know um, dynamics romantically. What IPV may
Mm-hmm.
may come up, like for those who don't know what IPV is, interpersonal violence or domestic abuse, or an inability to express one's emotions. All these things, or the idea of being a people pleaser and not being in tune with oneself. All these things can be associated um, factors or impacts of that practice, especially if you came from a particular environment that you weren't reared to have any sense of agency. And so for the Black experience, there's a particular way that we discipline our kids. It's not just the hitting, it's the culture around it. It's the rhetoric around it. It's the
Yeah.
emotions around it. It's
Explain that more.
it's rooted. So the way we whoop ass is rooted in oppression. It's
Hmm.
rooted in oppression. I mean, plain and simple. So when
Yeah.
Black folks, that's why I give a side eye when Black folks say, "Well, other cultures do it." I was like, "Yeah, but again, like I said to you earlier, we ain't them."
Yeah. Can you give us an example of the difference between like, Black people, the way we provide corporal punishment being rooted in oppression versus like, our white counterparts? Like what
We
did that look
celebrate
like?
it.
Okay.
We celebrate it. We laugh at it. We laugh at the trauma of it. And, and I think a lot of it has to deal with the undertone of the Black experience. To be Black is to be oppressed.
Hmm.
That's our cult. That is our cult. Like when people say, "What is Black culture?" It's rooted in oppression. That's one of the reasons why I don't know what it was like for you growing up, in Delaware in this context, but for a number of Black people whose parents grew up or had them grow up in communities that were at least middle class, or they came from even higher class environments. There's always this pull and this contingency to still have some cultural understanding or competency in unfortunately our communities that come from poverty. So like you still having to be rooted in this idea of being hood, you
Hmm.
know, in order for you to have a level of cultural currency that is known as Blackness. That if
Yeah.
certain levels of trauma institutes um, your black card, or your
Hmm.
or you being as they used to say back in the day, down up. It's no, I mean, I know I'm gonna ruffle some feathers. It's like no different from, actually they one and the same. It's like no different from if you're part of a Greek organization and and you find out that somebody's process wasn't like your process. that's that's what I'm talking about.
Okay.
That is what I'm talking about. And so that's why, like for example, if you articulate yourself in a particular way. Now again, we've begun to accept the idea that Blackness is not a monolith, but there's still deep rooted ways in which we identify ourselves, how we
Yeah.
associate ourselves, how, again, even the context of what I was talking about earlier, being able to express oneself, it's very limited based off of this conditioning process of whooping a child. So, for example, on my show, I had a brother who is an artist this week. His name is Davion Chester, but he goes by Real Tunes, and his artwork is really famous throughout Instagram, the whole social media world. And so he did a satirical commentary in one of his art pieces around a mother was whooping her child as a kid. Like, you want to cry? I'm gonna give you something to cry about. And fast forward, under the sketch under is him as a young adult, and he's not emoting. And
Hmm.
she's like, I don't know why you're not expressing yourself. And this is the common thing that gets talked about. It's one of the social outcomes I plan on further exploring.
Yeah.
And so there's even rooted. So let's go sociology real quick. You know what I'm
Hmm.
saying? Like, just to let y'all know, my background is social work. So with me saying that is that I'm responsible for having general knowledge around a number of social sciences in order to make my point. So let's go
Period.
sociology.
That's what makes it legit. But go ahead.
Thank you. So let's go sociology. So there's a term called social death, and so it's a term that they use, and it's still really new and still really fresh. But it's one of the topics that I plan on discussing with the black, not only the black experience but the black man experience, because there is a part of our rearing experience. There is a sense of death that comes, social death that comes to a lot of black men, as far as where they see the trajectory of their lives.
Hmm.
Because whether they're being told or not, it's like there's a ceiling for you of the way you can express yourself, what limits you can go, um, how you can present in the world. There's a limit. Even the context of you being a critical thinker, and that's the issue among that. That's even another, when you ask, even when you ask, like, what are the other impacts? We're critical thinkers, but there's a stifling in our critical thinking in reference to other cultures. So what do I
Yeah.
mean by that? You went to HBCU just like I did, and I walked in a lot of classes, and I noticed like a number of students were not quick to challenge the professors. Now,
Hmm.
over a period of time, as I went up in the ranks, it happened more. But for the most part, people didn't want to dance. They didn't want to intellectually dance. And people say, oh, they didn't read. Yeah, that's a part of that. But we're at premier HBCUs, and it's people of intelligence. I said, there's some type of relationship between people stepping up and creating discourse
Yeah.
and them choosing not to. And I
You
know
think
some
it's
of
like
that
a
is
power differential?
right, but where does that dynamic come from?
Yeah.
And so one of the arguments that I plan on further exploring or making is that we don't we talk about raising kids to be authority oriented or have a sense of agency, but
Hmm.
that's not really what we raise in the context of how we don't teach our children how to challenge authority with a level of respect.
Yeah.
You can't to challenge is a form of disrespect in many
Many
black
black
households,
households.
period, and let alone let you be an emerging man in
Anytime you
that
set
space.
a boundary in a black household, anytime you express any difference of opinion, it's deemed as disrespectful.
Exactly. So
Yeah.
again, this is such an interconnected issue, because how in the hell do you expect somebody to create healthy boundaries when that was the opposite of what they were conditioned as far as from their parents. I'll even give you another fact.
Exactly.
I'll even give you another example that
Mhm.
it's related, but it's not completely direct. So, um, it is my opinion in the context of like critical thinking, because of how most black folks are raised. But again, my topic is focusing with black men, is that most black when certain black people become of age, become adults, they don't like to be questioned. Where does that come from?
Mhm.
Well, I would argue that many of our parents had this disposition. Again, you don't pay no bills, X, Y, and Z. So what was that telling the emerging child that would eventually become a
Yeah.
young man, a young woman, is that when you come of age, when you become a monetary value, when your presence becomes a monetary value, then you get to say things. Then you get to speak. Till then, learn your place.
Yeah. When you can earn some money to contribute to the household, then you will respect your perspective. And that really, it makes people to internalize a concept that, like, my perspective, who I am, is worthless unless I'm contributing to something, unless I can provide in some way. And that's such a damaging way of thinking of yourself, because in turn you will tend to internalize some of, like, your thoughts, perspectives, opinions, boundaries. It's going to be
Right.
hard for you to do that as an adult.
Correct. And so for the even it's dangerous with either gender, but
Yeah.
what makes it even more deceptively dangerous for men is that we have been we have been conditioned to believe that in our innate value is rooted in our ability to provide or protect for others,
Mm.
but not to provide and protect for ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
There's this undertone, like altruistic expectation for not just men in general, but we're talking about black men. Now, whether we live up to it or not, that's a question.
Yeah.
That can be challenged, but the expectation. Well, if my value is based off that, how in the hell can we even practice self care?
Mm.
So I'm arguing. I'm making the argument of this practice that it's attached to all these outcomes. Although parents use it as a protective factor to ensure that their kids come a full term, it's like, yeah, but you're killing other aspects of who they are. Other
Mm-hmm.
and then, if they're blessed and fortunate enough, they'll get out in the world and learn those things. That's a big if. That's a big,
If
you
if
know.
they're provided with that environment that will allow that.
Exactly. Now, again, there are there are four different parenting styles that were created by white folks. There was
Mm.
authoritative,
Mm-hmm.
authoritarian, neglectful, and who was that fourth one? I'm forgetting all my
Does it start with a
facts.
P?
I
Uh,
want I want
Punitive. Hold on. Is it that?
uh
Let me look it up.
mm, it was. I'm trying to remember.
I feel like this was on the E triple P, so I should know this.
it's but it's so we know it's four. The reason why
Yeah.
I'm bringing them up is because in the late '70s there was
Permissive.
thank you
Yeah, yeah,
permissive,
yeah.
thank you. That's basically somebody that enables. But
Mhm.
what they did was they created four additional ones that spoke more to the parenting styles of black people, which included ass whoopings on the books. And
I
so,
did not know that.
oh
What's it
yeah,
called?
the article, I'll send the article to you,
Okay.
so you can see it for yourself. Now, the reason why I bring this up is because in this particular article, what they talked about was, well, what was the long term impact of these practices when they added ass whoopers to each one of these different parenting styles, and they found that so there was one called no nonsense parenting.
Hmm.
No nonsense parenting was a mixture of authoritative parenting style with ass whoopers. So what
So
they
authoritative with, okay. Okay.
so what they found was is that uh, no nonsense parenting had the least negative impact,
Hmm.
but it wasn't because of the ass whoopings. The authoritative parenting style itself was the really deciding factor. The the authoritative parenting practice neutralized some of the negative outcomes of corporal punishment. Now, some people read that as like, okay, well, as long as I do X, Y, and Z,
Hmm.
uh, my kid's gonna be fine. And I was like, that's not necessarily the case because this practice, what comes with this practice, there's some things that are insidious. There's things that you're not going to necessarily see come up. Like again,
Hmm.
like for the whole context of, am I ensuring that my child knows how to be vulnerable? Am I teaching my
Yeah.
child in the process of all that knows how to challenge me? And am I healthy enough to receive that challenge?
Am I healthy enough to receive that challenge from my child? Wow.
So I'll give you an example of a moment where I heard heard a parent of a gen what was he? He was a Generation X. Yeah, he was Generation X. So in the new docu series Dear Mama, Afeni Shakur, God rest her soul, is talking about. She talks about the last time she whooped Tupac, and as she's swinging, Tupac, he's like, and she was very clear in saying this. Tupac didn't try to hit her or attack her, but he blocked the blows. And he said to her, he's like, I'm not going to let anybody beat me down.
Mm.
And she said that when he said that, it it humbled her. And she's like, when he said that, it stopped. And you have to understand who you have to remember who Afeni Shakur was. This was a highly, highly educated
Yeah.
radical woman. So
Yeah.
it took it. So the reason why I bring that up is because I just set the example of it's going to take a parent who respects, is able to receive their child challenging them in a particular way to see it, the value of it. She was a learned woman.
Mm-hmm.
That ain't everybody's circumstance,
No.
right? She's a shining example. She's an outlier in that context.
Mm-hmm.
For other parents, that gave them fuel to beat.
Exactly. I'm just imagining how that would go to somebody who would see that as disrespect or a challenge.
Well, for most kids, well, I can't say for most, but for a number of kids who first experienced it, who experienced it in a particular moment, they respond in their natural inclination, which is to actually either block or resist.
Yeah.
And what usually gets said is, "You don't get to dot 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 dot. You
Mhm.
don't dot dot dot." So again, and you have to we have to walk people down this road because they don't know. It's like, okay, so what do you think you were saying to your son or daughter when you said you don't get to do dot 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 in the long term? How do you think that presents? And so we
Mhm.
again, as I told you about the money thing, it's all connected. As I stated about the money thing in reference to this idea of intention,
Yeah.
the long plan, the long plan. It's like, yeah, you have this plan, but you haven't thought about this B side of this thing. And again, it's a cultural thing. Well, this is all I know.
Right.
And black folks, we're not the only people that say this, but again, we say it, but we have the larger repercussions of it.
Mm-hmm.
I hear most black people say, "Oh well, there's not a book on parenting," and the reality of it is, there's books, there's classes, etc. It's just not popular to go research that in our community.
It's not popular, and also it feels, I ain't gonna hold you. Like some of the parenting strategies that we're educated on to like teach parents when we are providing that, it feels unnatural to a lot of black parents. Like
Understandable.
people say all the time, Dr. Reynolds, we black, like we ain't grow up like this. Like this is
Un-
not something that we would say or do or what have
un-
you. Like, can you
Understandable.
imagine in a black household somebody doing the broken record technique when the little Johnny's over here, yelling and screaming and asking why I can't XYZ? Like it's just it's like a culture shock, like having to respond in a different way.
And it is.
Yeah.
I think it's going to be up to us to come with more culturally competent
Mm-hmm.
strategies. I
Yeah.
think, and this is we take our cues from these spaces as well. I think some of the ways we can develop interventions is how things anecdotally get mirrored
Mm.
in television, because they're not majority of the content that shows the black experience in television. Um, they don't necessarily show a kid getting their ass whooped. There were certain shows that displayed that, like Good Times. Um,
Mm-hmm.
what was another show?
Everybody hates Chris.
Everybody Hates Chris. So the Wonder Years, the new iteration of Wonder Years, the Don Cheadle's character talks about it. He narrates about it.
Mm-hmm.
It happens, but they don't show it.
They don't show it.
They don't show it. So, but if you look at the spectrum of black shows that showcase families, corporal punishment is not something that gets directly shown. And there are other ways, even like in the Cosby Show.
Mm-hmm.
Cosby didn't whip his kids, as far as we knew. And so and yet we still identified with the show. We still, and what I think that creatively as social scientists, you and I, we have to take some creative lens from how can we still make our interventions black without the hitting,
Yeah.
the blackening, pun intended for this new, this new movie. Without the blackening, I'm gonna beat the black off of you.
Yeah.
How do we make it? How do we make it still culturally competent? And I think the other thing too is that it's very interesting to me that when I hear like educators or people who work with kids that by law
Mhm.
they can't put their hands on them, but then when they get home it's a different story. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
Like, okay, well we do it here. What's good for the goose is good for the gander. You know what I'm saying? And I get it. When they ain't mine, I said I
Mhm.
hear that, but what I'm saying? Like discipline, there are multiple ways of establishing discipline. Just like in the Bible, it says, in my house there are many mansions.
Yeah.
We just ain't used to being in other mansions because it's uncomfortable.
Mhm.
Just like working out. When you first start out, it's uncomfortable. I
Yeah.
ain't
Yeah.
lived this way before. If you've been to hot yoga, I don't like this position. I don't like this heat. I can't take the heat. Let me get out this kitchen. That when I hear us talking about, to me all it is like I ain't used to that. That's not what I was conditioned to do. I don't feel like doing it.
Mhm.
You know what I'm saying? Like, and so my thing is like we have to be invested in creating something different, is because we won't be able to create healthier communities if we don't challenge all these things. And I'm just talking about one aspect of it. And the other thing is that it's of our self-interest, because nobody else is going to be as vested in ensuring the health and sustainability of our community than us.
Yeah.
Nobody is interested in that. Nobody outside of us. As a matter of fact, they're more invested in the idea of us degrading each other. They're more invested. So it's like we have to take the full responsibility and question all the things that have made us what we are.
Mhm.
And so that's why this study is so important, is because
Yeah.
you know there has been a call to arms for Black men to become more self-aware
Mhm.
and more engaging and more present now than ever. It's like, okay, well, in order for us to do that, we have to examine why we're not so present and
Mhm.
where these things come from. And so, in summation of all of what I
Yeah.
said, that is why I'm doing this.
Yeah, yeah. Because I think once we kind of like hone in on the parenting piece, then
Mm-hmm.
that'll definitely impact various domains of like overall the black family, and that's how we build the black community overall through focusing on family. But Khalil, are you aware of any specific parenting strategies that are specific to black people?
Honestly, no.
You got to develop this, like,
Yeah, I'm thinking about it now. Now, what I
yeah.
can tell you is that there's a section in my literature review that has interventions that have been used that have been um, positive, have
Okay.
had positive results. There's one that comes off the top of my head, like the triple P, triple P intervention. Don't ask me how it works, because I don't remember exactly, but I remember reading the results. Results suggest that. Um, and there's a couple others, and here's the thing: they specifically looked at our population to see, does this work? And they went to the spaces where we were accessible, like the Head Starts, you know,
Mhm.
which is that's a really good marker. That's a really good
Yeah.
marker. Not to sound prejudiced, um, but if it's an intervention that works with a particular part of our population who doesn't necessarily have as many resources, if it's
Mhm.
working with them, that has great implications for it working with everybody else.
Yeah.
Now, one of the other things that I didn't talk about regarding this is education is a big part of this, meaning that it is said, and again, different articles that I've read over a period of time make this claim that the lower the education, the lower the education of the parents in the household, the
Mhm.
more likely that child is to be hit.
Yeah,
That's just
that's
across
facts.
the
Yeah.
board. And what that suggests is that you got parents who come from an educated environment. They think more pensively around how they choose to deal with you. So
Mhm.
they're gonna be more tolerable in certain ways. They're gonna be committed to having different options. Like, people ask me, when I talk about this, did you grow up getting your ass whooped? And I said, I would like to say that my experience was moderate. And what I mean by that, yes, that did happen to me, but I also knew what standing in the corner was too,
Yeah.
as a young kid. Ironically, um,
And timeout. We had
timeout. Yeah,
timeouts too. We had a good little mix. You
yeah.
know,
You
we got
know,
whooped and we had a little mix in there.
yeah. So
Yeah.
all those things, all those things. But what I'm challenging is that hey, we can't tell the system that our lives matter if we don't change the way we rear the lives in the space where we say it matters. Like,
Mm.
how powerful is it to say, well, damn, my parents did a great job in raising me, and they didn't have to beat me to do it.
Yeah.
It's like when a black man or black woman, but particularly when a black man can say that to the environment, that's a totally different conversation. That's a totally different frame of reference. My parents didn't beat me, so why do you think you can? Why do you
Mm.
think you have that right? And then the other thing is that, again, I'll say this, and we can move on.
Yeah.
We say
Oh, this is good.
we say I do it, so I'll keep them out of jail. I want to keep my. But if you look at the numbers, that's not stopping it. Again, there's deeper issues to why systemic, you know, racism plays a role into our incarceration. And so, like, that's not a thing. That's not a
Mm.
thing. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's not a thing. And so, like, what I'm challenging us is like, hey, man, we got to be more sophisticated about this. Everybody want to talk about intergenerational trauma and breaking curses and all the little cute little buzzwords we like to say now. It sounds real good.
Mhm.
Pimp C used to say it's cute. And it is. It's real cute. But there's some real work that has to be take place, and
For
it's not
sure.
the work is not pretty. It's ugly.
Yeah.
It's ugly, and I'm waiting for us to get ugly. I'm waiting for us. That's what I'm waiting on. I mean, and we're starting to. Let me not so cynical. We are starting to get a little ugly. But I still see, as Carlton Pearson would say, you yet holding on. We still holding on, and I get it, but I'm just like, all right.
Yeah. So, what piece of advice would you give to the parents or people preparing to be parents who are listening in terms of their parenting?
I think one of the first things that I would tell aspiring parent or a parent who is on the way, I said, I think before you have kids, you need to take a fitness
Take a
test.
what test?
A fitness test. And
Okay.
the reason why I say that is that I think a lot of kids get their ass whooped because their parents are out of shape and overweight. Let's start there. And what I mean, again, I'm gonna hurt some people's feelings today. That's fine. And the reason why I'm saying that is because you are not in the physical capability of dealing with a child's energy, and so you end up criminalizing their behavior, no different than how the environment will criminalize them,
Hmm.
simply because you're out of shape.
Hmm.
Number one, get in shape to raise a child. You know,
And it's also just to your point, like it's also just very lazy. Like, if your child does do something that's you deem as inappropriate or
yeah,
disrespectful or whatever, and your immediate go-to is to hit as opposed to like educating and correcting that behavior.
no,
Yeah, it's lazy. It's lazy
yeah,
parenting.
yeah. But if that's all I know, that's
Yeah.
all I know.
Yeah.
And that's what we say. That's all I know, because we's black. And I'm sorry.
No,
I'm
you're
sorry.
good.
They could be like, yo, this motherfucker is cool. But no, I'm saying that because, again, that's a foundation. The other thing is that, hey, pick up some literature around the subject.
Hmm.
There's another woman I'll mention to you. Her name is Linda Villarosa.
Hmm.
She is a sister that teaches in I think the journalism department in NYU. My time at James Madison gave me the opportunity to. You should check out our book. I actually got it around, but the book is about how systemically um, black people experience racism within the medical profession.
For sure.
So
Yeah.
it's it's I believe it's catered directly towards. I want to say it's catered directly towards women because that's where her initial worked within. She was a writer for Essence in the health and wellness area for the longest.
Mm-hmm.
When we got to conversing, and I told her what my subject matter was, she ended up revealing to me. She ended up revealing to me that she's like, Khalil, she was like, in the '90s, myself and I think it was either another educator or social worker and a doctor. We wrote this book around parenting, and I still need to get it. She was like, we wrote this book around Black parenting. That's another thing too. We talk about the book. We talk about the idea from the book Stolen Legacy. There's a legacy of knowledge that we do not know about because we don't actively go seek it out.
Mm-hmm.
So, and she's not the only person that's written that. So, anyways, I'm going on a tangent. They wrote a book about Black parenting specifically, and so when they got to the chapter around corporal punishment, there was a schism between the writers around it. She didn't agree. I think it was a stalemate in between the other individual, and I can't remember if they were educated or not, and then the doctor. So there was a back and forth. I think they decided to still, I think, write about it against. But and she told me, she's like, check. She's like, if you go through my history, you'll find the book. You need to check that out. And then there's another book. There's another book called Conscious Parenting. It's called Conscious Parenting. I strongly recommend anybody who plans on parenting or is continuing to,
You said conscious parenting?
conscious parenting.
Okay.
And so the biggest thing is that there's a matter of educating ourselves about
Yeah.
different approaches. And some things that, and then informally as a therapist, what I would recommend is that how well do you know your child? Because even in the context of, I'm gonna be honest with you, when I'm in we in Southeast. Um, when I hear most of my parents talk about their kids, they talk about them as if their dog needed to be fixed.
Ch-
Hello,
Child.
hello. And so I'm
Mm,
saying that you don't have a real relationship with your child in reference to who they are as human beings.
mm,
And so you're only concerned about nullifying this irritation because you have other things going on and you're already stressed out. And I hear you. I hear you. But there's a whole human being coming of age here and even to be an effective discipliner. And you know what? I'll give you another example. We in the content creation age. We in the content creation age.
yeah.
They're Black parents that are doing skits and things that are showing other ways to do this thing. So what do I mean by that? Um, there's a page on Instagram called Dear Fathers, um, and what it is, there was a clip of this father saying, "Hey, we just got back in, and yeah, we just, me and your mom just came back in, and the son was like, y'all didn't give me anything to eat." He was like, "Get you anything to eat?" He's like, "All right." He was like, "Get you anything to eat?" He was like, "Baby, did you get so and so anything to eat?" She was like, "Nah." He's just like, "I text." The son was like, I text y'all." She's like, "Oh yeah, you did." She's like, "Baby, remember I told you?" He's like, "Oh yeah, we forgot." And he followed that. He said, "Just like you forgot to do those X, Y, and Z."
Mm,
That's Black. That's very Black.
yeah.
He's
That was
like,
very Black.
that's very Black.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
That's why I'm saying, like, I love my people and I feel like I have the right to say this, and I'm saying that I love when it comes to discipline as far as being open to
Hmm.
different things. I still think we're very lazy.
Mm. And that's what I liked about that example. It was creative. It was still Black, so it felt true. I don't
Yes,
feel like I'm reading from a Barclays textbook and trying to do those techniques that they teach us in school, but also effective. Like it teaches you natural consequences and order of things when you
yes,
forget to take out the trash,
yes,
or do your homework or whatever.
yeah.
So yeah,
You
yeah,
know,
yeah.
and you can tell, and it's funny because I'm anti this in other areas, but I recognize this exists. But even in the context of a home in parenting, it's like saying to a son or daughter, I have a parent saying like, I love you, but there's some transactions that have to happen in order for this machine to keep working a certain way.
Mhm.
And you need to understand that you're a part of the machine. You're a part of the machine. And I'm not just here at your leisure.
Yeah.
And vice versa. But that takes a very that takes a very present.
Yeah. Present and
That's a
self-aware
you,
parents. Yeah.
so so a lot of this is that you ask me like, what are the things you can advise? You need to find a way to go to therapy.
Hello.
It ain't no, again, these are all, everything we were talking about is relationships.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Everything relationships.
Yeah.
We're talking about relationships. Um, that's going to be the telltale sign. And I think it's crazy because like I have homeboys now that they're coaching AAU teams and basketball and whatnot, and one of them, he has a facility back in Texas, and it was funny. I was listening to his assistant coach talk about him in reference to his kids, and his style is no different from a lot of coaches. But it was interesting to me because he's a parent also, and he says, B. Phil's got a. He's like he got a temper. And he's like he gonna let you know like you doing something. He's like he don't take disrespect, and he's getting these kids ass, but he ain't beating them, and there's discipline.
Yeah.
And so it's like I'm thinking in my head like all these coaches around the country are able to instill these discipline in these kids. Now, granted, I'm not saying it's 100% because some of these coaches do put their hands on these kids, in that fashion. But for the most part, that's not what's happening, and it's been like that for decades among decades. And so
Hmm.
my thing is that it's not impossible. It just takes more work.
For sure.
It takes more work. Just like
For
we talked
sure.
about. Just we talk about building again relationships. It's not impossible. It just takes a lot of work. Now,
Mhm.
now what I want from Black community is this: one or the other. If you're not down for the work, as they like to say in the South, just say that. Just say that. But don't. But let us not portray one thing when it's really the other. That's another issue that we have as well. I don't think black where we are now at a point. Black folks are not in a position to act like they're one thing and the other because that's causing a lot of confusion. There's a lot of confusion. We're already in a confusing time.
Yeah.
So we need to be as much as we can. We need to attempt to be as clear as possible. Even when we
Mhm.
find ourselves confused, we got to get to a point where we're saying, I'm confused and I don't know why. Again, we know.
Sometimes verbalizing it can be helpful, like
Yeah,
being transparent.
yeah. But again, again, it's a lot of unlearning about
Yeah.
I didn't come from that. And a lot of it is the fear of being exposed to that being used. And that's a reasonable fear. So
Mhm.
I hope for the people who will watch this program today and they hear me talk, I hope that they hear what I'm saying. It's coming from a deep rooted place of love, but there is a challenge. There is a charge I'm asking for us to think differently about this thing
Yeah.
because it is about revolutionizing our families.
I was just about to say that. I was about to say revolutionizing parenting because that's essentially what we're requesting. Like we need to revolutionize this. Otherwise, we're going to see the same cycles in our community
Yep.
that we've seen for the past few centuries.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
yeah. Nah, this was a dope conversation though. Thank you so much, Khalil, for stopping by.
You're very welcome. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, yeah. Let
Thank
the
you.
people know where they can find you.
So you can find me on my Instagram. It is TS Griot, TMG. The easier way would just be spelling my name out, which is KAHLIL. You can space and then say Khalil Green, and you'll see that on Instagram. I'm very accessible. If you shoot me a DM, I speak back. I'm not a high and mighty. I ain't done nothing in this lifetime to ever act that way. Um, and I'm very I always try to be very personable as much as I can. But yeah, that's the main way people can contact me. I'm not in the space yet where I'm doing therapy privately. Just go ahead and disclose that. I work for somebody's company. Um, as a part-time therapist, and at some point in my career, I will get to a place where I am doing that. But primarily, where I'm at now is developing myself as a public academic,
Yeah.
um, and the scholar, and then also as a practitioner. So that,
Period.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, and you can do both. I'm a
absolutely.
believer in that.
You're a shining example.
I'm trying. I'm
Listen,
trying.
listen. Don't listen. She's human. She has her struggles, but since I've known her, she she struggles real well. I'm gonna tell y'all like that.
Oh,
Doesn't mean
thank
she
you.
doesn't struggle, but she struggles real well. And you know, that's a black woman for you, but you know that's another.
That part, I literally, I was just having this conversation the other day with my twin.
Mm,
Um, and we're gonna have a whole episode about it on our joint podcast. But we was just like, yeah, we not okay. We just in contract. Like, we just obligated to do these things. Which is really the plight of the black woman, and
yeah,
feeling like we have to continue to persevere even in those times when we are struggling. So,
that's right.
child. But yeah, today was dope. Thank you so much, Khalil, for joining us. Make sure y'all follow Khalil and check out his podcast. What's the name of your podcast again?
Feel some type of way.
Feel Some Type of Way, the Feel Some Type of Way podcast that airs every Wednesday at 9 p.m. Make sure y'all tune in next Wednesday for another episode of the Paging Dr. Shonda podcast. What's up?
Church finger.
What's
Real
up? What's
quick.
up?
So, if you tune in next week, it will be on Tuesday. Due to a special request, time it will be Tuesday at 9 p.m.
Period. Y'all got that? So Tuesday at 9 p.m. So make sure you guys are tuning in. Thank you again for joining the Paging Dr. Shonda podcast, brought to you exclusively by the Revolt Podcast Network, which is anchored in hip hop and powered by creators.